Hi, and welcome to Tabletop Tip of the Day. My name is Storm Cook, and here we talk about the intersection of gaming and maybe a little bit of art. And today I want to talk about a couple of techniques. One I've kind of touched upon before, but I'm going to come back to it again because I have a real example from our actual game. And then the other one is sort of a brand new for Tabletop Tip of the Day. So the first one, which is the new technique, is doing what I call sort of round robin map um, not expansion because we're not expanding the map, but adding in details to the map. And if someone has a good term for that, let me know in the notes below. Give a chat out. So, anyways, I have a game called Mutants. Not sorry, blah, 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 Mercenaries, Merchants, and Mystics that I'm playtesting right now, and it's set in the same world as our Stonetop game was set. And this was the Stonetop map that I created, which is really bare bones because most of the stuff that was happening was going on in the Stonetop setting itself, which is a published setting. So this map I just pasted in there for position. Um, Most of the action happened there, right? So but we did sort of like Yaniv became very important because, and Yaniv's down here because Yaniv is where one of the player characters was, and Lygos became important, which is because um, that was like the nearest major city. And so for my MMM game, I set it in Lygos, and which is sort of like a pirate city and stuff like that. And we've played it for about 4 sessions, 5 sessions, I think, so far, and um, that was cool. It was great. But I knew I came to the game, and this was an evening where I knew things. This was going to be a bit of downtime. This wasn't going to be a lot of venturing stuff. They'd just gotten through an arc. They made a big score. They had to sell that score, and it was going to be sort of catching up with their normal life and whatnot. And so I was like, okay, I've got all this blank territory with no real cool shit in it. So let's do a round robin session. And this was a technique that I learned back in the day with Judd Carlman and Jeff Lauer when I was playing with them, and we were doing Sons of the Cryos. And in his Jeff's Giants game, which is actually a published Ashcan, there there are rules for doing this where we sit down with a piece of paper and we say, my giant, likes these, the skull mountain of whatever, and whatnot. And it works great at tabletop. Now I was a little concerned about taking that to a digital realm because we play virtually. And so what I did was I took a section of this map and I pasted it into a Google Jamboard, and then I could share that Google Jamboard with my players, and they could all draw on it and write on it and do the stuff. And so I started the game going, not the game, but this sort of technique off by going, here's the pillars of Tobias. What the pillars are, I don't know. Maybe when they go there, if they ever go there, we can expand on what the pillars of Tobias is, and um, but it was just to give them an indication of how they wanted, how I kind of wanted things to go. So I believe Jeff came up with the salt caves of Aniko, and which is cool because now like a salt trade could be coming through Lygos, and that creates an interesting economic kind of thing that is happening in the background. And we might never go to the salt caves. It just might be flavor, and that's fine if it's just flavor, or it can expand into an actual adventure if that makes sense. So one of the things that had been established in the Stonetop game and carried over to the Lygos game is that there was a drought around Lygos, and they were starving for about 2 years. There was a drought, and the drought is over. And so Neil said, "Oh, there tremendous amounts of rain came," and he created a floodplain. And he said, along with the rain, dark monstrous things came out of the north mountains and stuff like that. So we called it the floodplain of dark things for now. I don't love the name, but that's what we came up with in the meantime. So that's cool. Drought's over. There's a floodplain. Part of Lygos's nearby agricultural territory has been swallowed up. Cool. Jim came up with the Observatory of Zalagaz, which is a wizard's tower, on the cliffs overlooking the sea that has been repurposed as a lighthouse. Awesome. Um, Neil came up with the graveyard because his character Zarina is a wreck diver. She's a deep diver, and she recovers artifacts and things like that. And not artifacts, but anything that is worth a value that she can carry to the surface. That's how she makes her living. So the graveyard is a bunch of shoals and coral reefs and bad currents and bad wind direction and stuff like that that come in and wreck ships. And so there's a fertile ground for her to exploit. Again, this might be something we visit. Again, it might not be. Um, we came up with the Jungle of Lost Temples. I think that might have been Jim. I can't remember who came up with it. So there's a jungle here, and there was lost temples in there. So that was such a neat idea, and we all kind of glommed onto it because someone sort of said, "Hey, we should have a treasure map." That will probably be our next sort of arc. Um, Another cool thing that someone came up with was the Horai, the Island of the Giants, which there's no giants there, but there are giant statues like Easter Island, right? And occasionally, no one lives there. Another giant head appears, and it freaks out the sailors, and so that's kind of cool. And then we have the Heretics Island, which is in the past the Temple people would exile people to the Heretics Isle, and then the descendants of Heretics Isle have grown up on that island, and they're supposedly cannibals, but we don't really know for sure. That's just the rumor. And so there you have a technique where your players are creating things, that will be fun and to explore or just fun to have in the world. And I think that's a great technique. So the other thing that we did that same night is I came up with some leading questions for each player and for each character to start the game session off. And this is another way of doing world building. So for Jeff's character Belloc, and Belloc is sort of a god of, he's a cleric of the god of knowledge, right? And so he has sort of he's Indiana Jones in a cassock. So I asked Belloc, one of the great houses has taken an interest in your archaeological activities. Which house, which individual, and why are they interested in what you do? So it's not just one question; it's sort of compound questions, several questions in a row. And Jeff came up with Awalamir Mazala was a childhood friend and had the same tutor. He is showing an interest in old maker items, and he wants to cement a big score to cement his position in the house. So yeah. So now Malawir was an NPC that I hadn't introduced in play, but since they were asking for what are the five great houses of Lygosa like, which are these old pirate families that have been there for 200 years and have like really condensed their power and are the power elite of the city. I created a relationship map showing them. So I'll just expand this real quick. So Awalamir there is the kind of the one that Jeff picked, and so he had been introduced in the world, but we really haven't had him as like a living, breathing NPC yet. But this was a chance to do that, and actually in the session, Belloc goes to Malawir and tries to broker a deal for the stolen, not stolen goods, but the recovered goods. So that's another kind of cool way to sort of work in world building. Like, I had already created a Malawir, but I really now Belloc and Amalawir are friends, and that changes things and cool. And then we actually had a scene around it. And Amalawir appeared in a couple of scenes, and it had desires and motivations, and that all came around from that question. So I asked Jim's character Cavan, and Cavan is sort of like a marine and a soldier, and and um, and it's just kind of this happy-go-lucky swashbuckler in a way. Um, I said, Cavan, while you're guarding the warehouse of goods liberated from Maker's Lab, you spot a familiar figure from your past watching the warehouse. Who are they? What is your relationship with them? And is it coincidence or are they snooping around? And Jim came up with Carwin Badham, and Carwin Badham is this drinking buddy from Cavan's past, and when Cavan was on the skids, and Carwin constantly comes up with these harebrained schemes. He's never really had them pay off. He only has enough money to drink barely, and his plans just don't get off the ground. Um, and here was a character. Now, I already wanted in the back of my mind, I wanted to introduce a third party that was interested in the maker's goods, the big score that the players had gotten. So here was my conduit. I actually set up Cadwin as becoming the broker for the sorcerer and the sorcerer's people, and so for the first time ever, Cadwin's information and harebrained scheme was actually going to work. And in the end, the sorcerer ended up buying the goods, and Cadwin made a nice bit of coin to like actually elevate himself up, and like he actually is suddenly doing okay. And so we had this great NPC. I mean, Cadwin is a hilarious and and to come about and like out of this leading question, right? I would never have come up with Cadwin on my own because I didn't see a need for it. But by leading Jim to come up with it, then there was this character in play, and it worked great. So for Eric's character Zaidi, and Zaidi is our sorcerer who owns a little uh, curio and trinkets shop where he sells charms. I said a regular customer, but Dre comes bouncing in. She's a down on her luck seamstress, but she seems to be dressed extremely well, and she hugs Zaidi before he can react, and her luck seems to have turned around, and she's doing really well for herself. But Zaidi detects a demonic presence around her, and it isn't coming from the charm that he had made for her. So, what has been her windfall, and what does this demonic presence seem to want? And Eric said, well, her fortunes rose because this demon wants her to weave a tapestry with certain sigils to allow him to have entry into our world. And it also brought her skills up incredibly high, and she's getting jobs, other jobs besides this tapestry jobs, and all of a sudden her work is great and is high in demand. Now, we didn't really follow up with this, except that I did tie it back to the sorcerer that I introduced, that the demon that had been summoned by that sorcerer, and that demon was doing the sorcerer's bidding. So Zaidi didn't like Lord Zir, the other sorcerer. I don't know why they both have Z's. It just happened that way. Um, uh, so I did weave a little bit of that in play, and sometimes these leading questions are just going to be flavor. They're just going to kind of fill out the world, and they're not going to be super important in play, and that's okay. That's completely fine. Some are going to create entire campaign arcs, and that's okay too. So for Neil's character Zarina, I said, unfortunately, Belloc's warehouse seems to be the talk of the docks and taverns. And this was something that Zarina was trying to avoid because she wanted to safeguard the goods. The common questions are what's in it and what they're doing at night, etc. But this also has brought out a promising contact to buy a large portion of the maker treasure. How did you hear about this interested party? Who are they, and why are they motivated to buy old maker items? And Neil very cleverly went back to our Stonetop campaign, got an NPC called Kefra, who was like Neil's character PC Marn grew up with Kefra, and Kefra was part of his merchant guild house, and Kefra was a traveling merchant, but he was more than that to Marn's family. He is like their representative, out in the world. And so, yeah, Kefra's in Lygos. Makes perfect sense. Lygos is between Stonetop and Yaniv, and a perfect person to take off some of the goods. So through my leading questions, I had two really established contacts who might want to buy maker goods, and the session actually had scenes with them and finding out how much they'd pay and what did they want. It ended up going to the sorcerer because the sorcerer outbid everybody, and Walamir, who was Belloq's friend, could only afford a certain amount of them. He couldn't afford all of them, and so those leading questions created this auction situation at the end that we resolved with a little bit of role playing and some dice rolls, and it was cool. It was really cool. It was a neat way to have kind of a quiet session, but things actually progressed and happened, um, and it's a great way of getting your players to fill in spaces and fill them in ways that you don't expect. So going back to the map, um, uh, I took this map, I took it back to Stone Top, and I expanded on it. So like I know that the um, the weather comes in from the east, from the southeast, unlike continental United States, which it comes from the west generally. Generally, that's the way the wind blows, the way the weather comes. And I wanted, and because this had already been established in play, the direction of the wind, and because we have a very sort of maritime centric kind of city, so this stuff sort of these questions got asked, and I wanted because we've already established that this is like Lebanon, Greece, kind of Mediterranean environment, I was like, okay, I need a jungle, but I want that humidity to be trapped. So I created a ring of plateau and hills to trap that moisture in there, and that's what creates the jungle. It's a little hotter than other areas nearby. And okay, so we have a reason for a jungle. Now, also, it had already been established that there was a trade route between Yaniv and Lagos. That had been established in the. Oops, I lost my cool color. Um, that had been established in the Stone Top campaign already, and so I didn't want the trade route to go through the jungle. So I decided to make that Dagger Plateau here, and then have the trade route, which I called the Tenfold Road, going through the Jawari Valley and skirting the jungle, right? And or avoiding the jungle altogether. And that was something that I add to the map that I'm drawing off of what they have put down, right? I'm just sort of expanding on it. Like I created Salt Town in the north near the Salt Caves, because I thought there'd be a town on the river, and that would be a staging ground for the salt to go downriver to Lagos. It just sort of economically makes sense. I'm going to go erase this stuff because I don't want this on this layer. Um, so and then I just sort of took their ideas and kind of like I made little icons and stuff like that. I mean, this is a really quick map. This is just me getting the idea down fast enough, but cleaning it up a little bit from the Google Jamboard that we had done before. So that is what we ended up with. And so I know from doing this map and from the events that we've gotten, there was like, wouldn't it be cool if we found a treasure map was mentioned at the table? And I was like, that's a great idea. And so we're going to have an adventure going to the jungle of lost temples to find a lost temple. And that's awesome. Now I have, my concept for the next arc already done, and I get to, incorporate some of the things that the players have come up with, like next session. So that's my technique of kind of sharing the world building with your players. And if you like this, and please hit the subscribe button, please hit the like button, and watch out for another video and keep on keeping on. Thank you for watching. Bye.